Like I would guarantee all three are not on the roster this time next year, but I think there's a very real chance that all three are on the roster in the 2023 season.
Well, in happier news, we know the path to keeping Georgia and the Georgia fan base unhappy this fall, Matt Green. Heather Dinich outlined the ways and the teams that actually have a realistic chance at beating the Dawgs in 2023, Matt Green. And I want to briefly touch on this because I hadn't considered this, and this is something that I do think is interesting, and I wonder what your perspective is on this. So she wrote in regards to Vols versus the Dawgs, right? Quote, how it impacts the CFP if Tennessee wins. A Tennessee win could eliminate Georgia from the top 4 and catapult the Vols in or cement their spot. If Tennessee wins the East, one-loss Georgia will have some strength of schedule issues on selection day. Their non-conference schedule includes UT Martin, Ball State, UAB, and Georgia Tech. We understand that there was one game, a big game, that was removed because of the SEC changes. That's a problem. Without a win against the Vols and no SEC title, Georgia will have a difficult time claiming a statement win. I do wonder, Matt Green, the precedent is a little bit different because they are the back-to-back national champs, that even if Tennessee beats them at home, and God knows what this podcast will look like if I come back on Sunday after leaving Neyland here in Knoxville with a victory over the Dawgs, following the cigar victory over the Tide a year ago. But still a ways away. We'll see what happens. That being said, Georgia does have a strength of schedule issue. Like, that is part of it's not their fault. Like we mentioned the Oklahoma thing. Part of it, I'm sure a lot of folks don't really want to play Georgia. If I had to guess, when Georgia wants to book some of the bigger schools, they're like, hard pass would be my guess for a lot of teams. It would not surprise me.
Well, and that's why it's unfortunate they did get rid of the Oklahoma game.
Yeah.
It's a solid 7-8 years in a row of out of conference that Georgia's got, but that Oklahoma one really put a hole in it.
And now the question is, like, if they were to lose and Tennessee does go to the SEC title, whatever, and Georgia's left out with one loss, would they really would the committee hold it against them enough to actually keep the two-time defending national champions out? Because I don't think that's true. I think they would still get benefit out. Obviously, there's so many other variables in terms of what other records look like and that sort of thing. But I don't think Tennessee or Georgia missing the SEC title with their strength of schedule would be enough to keep them out as a one-loss team, generally speaking. Do you agree with that?
Well, for one, just hypothetically, you can't answer it because had that happened this year, if Georgia has the schedule they have and just how the thing plays out, like, Georgia's probably going to be in the top 4. Like who was Ohio State's best win? This, like, Penn State. They basically, that was like the only good team they played at all that they beat, other than obviously Michigan, but they lost that game. So I think you're right that just the I don't know, subconscious feeling about Georgia of winning back-to-back national championships. It's obviously a very different team, like Stetson's gone and stuff, but a lot of the defense is going to be the same. I think it would be tough. A lot of it would depend on Tennessee because, I mean, if Tennessee is 12-0, 13-0 going to after winning the SEC championship, or 12-1 after winning the SEC championship or something, if they're in that, like, top 3, top 4, then it's very easy to justify, well, Georgia just lost to one of the top 2 or 3 teams, and yeah, they're still one of the best 4 teams. So I think it's definitely possible. I think the conference, the strength of the schedule is definitely an issue. It definitely leaves little room for error. But that's also what we said in 2021 and in 2022 about Georgia's schedule. And it's like, before the season, there was no one on Georgia's 2021 schedule, and after the Clemson game, it was like, if they beat Clemson, they're going to go undefeated. And Arkansas ends up starting like 6-0, and that's College game day, and that's a huge atmosphere in Athens. And then Kentucky starts like 7-0 or 8-1 or something like that, and that's a College game day and a big time atmosphere in Athens. So it's like, and then last year, Tennessee is the number 1 team in the country coming to Athens, like the biggest game maybe in the history of Sanford Stadium. So we all kind of pretend to know what teams are going to be and what their schedule is going to be year in and year out. It's like Ole Miss was fraudulent this year. Like, they could be 8-1 coming playing Georgia next year, and Florida's in year 2 of Billy Napier. Like, they could see a huge jump, and Auburn with Hugh Freeze. It's like there's just so many teams. There's so many things that are going to happen that we don't know. That some of these teams are going to end up ranked on Georgia's schedule, and then obviously the game in Knoxville is going to be a huge game. But yeah, I mean, if you lose that, there's likely not going to be a lot of good data points on your schedule, but it'll be 11-1 versus, what are you comparing in the rest of college football at the end of the day? It's like, is there a one-loss Big 12 champion? Is there a one or two loss Pac-12 champion? Like, if there's a bunch of undefeated teams and one-loss conference champions, then yeah, a loss to Tennessee, that could be enough to keep Georgia out of the top 4.
It's also under the assumption that Tennessee is just would make the SEC title game, because I think that's still very generous based on what the schedule looks like and what I believe Joe Milton's going to be in 2023. I'm not they could beat Georgia and still very much not.
There's a chance, yeah, they go 10-2, but have a win over Georgia or something.
Maybe even
like
9-3, 8-4, like a Texas A&M type deal where it's they get over that hump and then they drop 2 or 3 dumb ones this year. So I don't know. I don't know. I think, like I said, I circled 2024 as the big year for Tennessee with the year 2 Nico, and you hope that he's able to sit the whole year, and then he is your Bryce Young, Justin Herbert type right away in 2024, and you're competing for a literal national championship.
Right now, I don't know what you were about to say, but the last thing I'll say, do you feel like there's any similarities with Heupel and the Dan Mullen era of Florida? Like, it feels like it has a lot of parallels to me, even from the fans talking shit, in terms of Tennessee fans and how Florida fans were. Like, you just look at the way the two programs were recruiting before those guys got there, signing 12th, 13th ranked classes. Then they had their
Tennessee was just in the top 10. And they're going to
I'm saying before Heupel, the roster that Heupel essentially inherited. It's get those mid-teen type of classes, and then he takes over for top 20 or so class, and then Dan Mullen signed 2 ninth ranked classes after his first 2 full classes. That's a little bit ahead of where Heupel is. The portal is also a little bit bigger, so Tennessee's doing things in the portal as well, but I don't know. There's something, and meanwhile, Georgia's just up here at the first, second, third ranked recruiting class in the country each of those years. They're in terms of if it is just like Dan Mullen, I think it was year 3, 18, 19, 20. It was year 3 that Dan Mullen got through and beat Kirby, but it didn't really amount to anything else. He's going to end up getting fired year 4. So I don't know. Just kind of the way the programs are built, I see some similarities there.
I don't know. I think there are some. I mean, I think one of the differences too. I would say that Florida we've talked about Florida and just what the program is when it's not Spurrier and Urban Meyer. But I think Dan Mullen, and especially when you listen to him talk, and he's clearly just a super, super bright football mind, and seems like a fun dude, and won a lot of games at Mississippi State. He was obviously an architect offensively for what Urban Meyer was at Florida, won a national title with Urban Meyer. So that was a little bit different. But I do think Heupel and one of the big difference between me and Mullen and Heupel, I think, is bigger than Heupel and Mullen. So I think the buy-in at the top at UT with Danny White and the AD and the boosters and the volunteer club, Inspire Sports, and just NIL as a whole is different than the buy-in at Florida. You just saw what happened with what's the kid's name who's not at Arizona State, the 5-star Jaden Rashada,
yeah,
that debacle. The buy-in at Florida and just their weirdness with their collective and the weirdness with committing to just football at Florida just doesn't seem the same. Where Tennessee, part of why I'm less worried about Heupel and recruiting and that sort of thing is the buy-in's pretty strong at the top. And
from a monetary perspective, you're probably right, but I don't even need to go that far. I think from just a psychological perspective, like I feel like there's a different standard at Florida, and it's like kind of how Texas is. It's like almost become like toxic, and it's like they don't give their guy enough time. Like they just expect to be good immediately. And the biggest difference is, if Heupel just turns out to not be like, for lack of a better term, a douchebag that nobody likes, like then he'll probably do okay. That seemed to be Mullen's biggest problem, was that just nobody actually liked him. So he didn't have a long leash because he just wasn't a likable person. But
I like Dan Mullen.
But I think the fan base is different. And Tennessee is like, they're kind of terrified of where their program has been the last decade plus. And like they're kind of like just, okay, this guy's got us on the right track. He's the guy. We're all in. It's not like, Dan Mullen, year 1, that's good. Did you beat Georgia? Year 2? Oh, that's good. Did you beat Georgia? And it's like year 3? Did you win the SEC, win national championship? All right. For year 4, you're out of here. So I don't know. It's
I don't think that's how Tennessee fans are looking at this. Like, he's got a lot of cachet at this point, and they overachieved last year. Look, it can change year to year. I just don't see a path where this offense falls off a cliff, and I think even Florida fans, like I said at the time, where I'm like, yeah, it's ending really bad down the stretch here for Mullen, but like Mullen's still a really, really good coach. He beat Kirby already a year ago. That you were right at the precipice of a college football playoff in 2020. Mm-hmm. You had the superstars. He knew how to get the ball to his superstars and Kyle Pitts and company. He was able to win a lot of football games with Kyle Trask, who was he didn't start a high school game, and just what that was, because Felipe Franks wasn't the guy, the 5-star there. So you go to Trask, and that was kind of a, hey, let's see what happens here. The guy can win with just about anybody. I think he's shown a lot more than Napier. Like, Napier's recruiting better, but like Mullen won a lot of games, and I thought at the time where I'm like, I don't know. Like, Mullen won at Mississippi State. He got you to number 1 at Miss State. The dude can coach. And I think when people talk about his recruiting, I'm like, it's a little overblown. Like, yeah, he wasn't doing Urban Meyer classes, but he was still 11th, 9th, 8th, whatever.
But I think that showed, like, that's not good enough to win in the SEC. Like, Mark Richt was doing better than that. Mark Richt was doing better than that.
But Mark
and
Richt
consistently
wasn't the offensive brilliance that Dan Mullen is. Like, you can make the case Dan Mullen's the smartest offensive mind before. Like, I mean,
yeah, but Mark Richt's a way better coach than Dan Mullen. Like, I
disagree with that.
I don't think
Mark Richt could have won like that at Mississippi State. I mean, Dan Mullen doesn't get enough credit.
Mark Richt averaged 10 wins for 15 years. Like, won the SEC twice. Like, this man was at Florida. Like, it was not like he's at a nothing school. And it's like his Mississippi State years, like, while he was good, like, there's a lot of up and down there, too. Like, the 2014 year gets – and this isn't all be about Dan Mullen.
He went 10-3 in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, that's the year that they were ranked number 1.
9-3 that next year.
But there's a 6-7 in there. Like, there's missing bowl games in there. It's like – it's not like they were just, like, great every year.
Well, also, let's throw out –
yeah, they were good a few times.
2020, he was first in the East. 2019, second. 2018 second, won 11 and 10 games. So 21 games total is the first 2 years. The 8-4 is kind of miscued. If you remember that, you had to watch the 2020 season for Mullen to like understand
for sure.
How that. He had one bad year in 4 years, and it was a 5-6. And I understand it went bad down the stretch. I don't know. I'll go to bat for Mullen. I think he's good. I think they overreacted.
I mean, that's possible, but I think there's intangible things that differentiate what's going on at Florida and what happened at Florida and what's currently going on at Tennessee. But I think there is some similarities in terms of, like, if you're truly gonna knock off the Georgias, the Bamas consistently, like, you do have to recruit into the top 5. You have to get some of those, like, elite. Like, you saw A&M. Obviously, they just missed a bowl game after signing number 1 class. That's not the only thing. But they did just beat Alabama a year before, and they've been consistently been recruiting in that top 6 or 7, like getting those elite classes. So I think Tennessee, Heupel, and that's what was always strange about Dan Mullen, was because he did have the immediate success on the field, and it never really improved the recruiting. So if Heupel is able to, turn the 10 win or 11-2 last year, turn that into the 9th ranked class, then maybe 7th, then the 5th. If they're able to actually work their way up,
is my guess. Is I think they somewhere. It depends on the Ryan Wingo, Mike Matthews.
And I'm just saying, as someone who lived through the Mark Richt era, of 7th ranked class in the country sounds really good until you check the list and you're like, oh, that's the 4th ranked class in the SEC. That's the 9th ranked class, like the 6th ranked class in the SEC. Like
Florida should be recruiting better than Tennessee. Georgia should be recruiting better than Tennessee. Alabama should be recruiting better than Tennessee. That's real. There is no excuse for any of those 3 schools to never be ahead of Tennessee in recruiting. The talent's better. The area's better. They should always win. Mark Richt underachieved in the recruiting front. You see what Kirby said. Look at just the best players. Tennessee, the majority of their classes year over year are from the state of Georgia. There is so much talent. You can make the case right now, I don't think it's close, that Georgia has the most amount of high school talent anywhere in the country. Like the best of the best are in the state of Georgia. Like you look at 7A football, like it's just powerhouse after powerhouse, 5-star after 5-star. Mike Matthews, and just not just because he's a Harvey guy. You just go up and down the list. Landon Thomas, y'all's new 5-star tight end. Oscar Delp, the year prior, he went to West Forsyth. Like
Georgia's got 3 5-stars from that 2025 class committed, and there's 2 5-stars in the state of Georgia ranked higher than those 3 guys.
Exactly. So like, there's no excuse. So I'm not discounting Kirby, but I'm like, no, Georgia has no excuse to not always be in the top 3 and be in top 2 SEC recruiting team. Bama, obviously, should always be there. So like Tennessee, if you're a logical Tennessee fan, you want to beat Florida sometimes in recruiting, but like if you're number 4 in the SEC most years, that's still a good place to live. Guess who's coming in the conference? Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is going to beat Tennessee in recruiting more years than not. So you're going to go down a little bit more. LSU is going to have years where they beat you.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's reality. Like that's just, what are you going to do about that?
But if you're not going to consistently sign better than the 5th or 6th best class in the SEC, you're never going to win the SEC.
I disagree.
That's just, I don't think
Auburn's
it's possible.
Done it.
I think Auburn was recruiting elite back in the day.
But they had Auburn is up and down. It's not like they're hitting top 4, top 3 classes over and over again. No, Auburn does not recruit like that.
Auburn was recruiting plenty of top 5 classes back in the early 2010s and that sort of thing. Like of that 2010 team, like that's an outlier. That team had no business winning a national championship. Cam Newton's just like, that's the single greatest season maybe of all time. But Auburn, that's an outlier, I think, because you're right. If you get a Cam Newton, then maybe everything's out the window.
Nico might be that.
I mean, I wouldn't expect anybody to be Cam Newton. That's like saying, if the guy we draft number 1 overall is LeBron James, then we might win a championship.
What I'm saying is what you want to be if you're Tennessee, you want to be in that 7 to 11 range in recruiting.
No.
You want to be in the blue chip ratio.
You got to get in that 4 to 7 range.
You want to get that once every 2 to 3 years.
It's Tennessee we're talking about. Like they got 100,000 people in that stadium. They got the huge NIL money.
Who should they be beating among those 3 I just outlined?
But I'm saying once they establish themselves as a good program,
it's close to home.
There's not a ceiling for Tennessee though. Like
disagree.
Tennessee can't win national championships. They can't sign a number 1 recruiting class.
I don't think they can ever have the sustainable recruits in the recruiting base to win multiple in a row or go on a run.
The players don't need to be in your state. Like
That's not true.
They're in the South. Like you can get guys from Florida, you can get guys from Georgia, you can get guys from Alabama, you can get guys from Tennessee. Nashville and Memphis, I think, are like 2 of like the fastest growing cities in the country, right? Like Tennessee's got people.
You're encouraging this Tennessee fan behavior. No, they don't. Tennessee, the state of Tennessee is pretty limited. A lot of 4-stars. Like, we are just dying for a 5-star like Trey Smith to come out in the offensive tackle category. Like, those guys don't exist year over year. So, it's just different. Guys want to stay close to home. They want their parents to be able to come to games, their friends, that sort of thing. They want to be close to home. That is generally speaking the case. It's hard to get a big-time Florida recruit out of the state of Florida at Tennessee.
It's hard to pry them away. Everyone recruits the state of Florida, though. Like those guys go all over the country. Like
But I mean, the vast majority stay.
I mean,
at
FSU,
FSU,
you look at
Florida, and
I don't know.
Miami.
You look at the last couple years. I bet you.
I mean,
think
Bama's been in there for a while, but
the last couple years, the top 10, 20 players, like I would say, over half of them are not going to Florida State, and Miami.
I can't speak to that. But I will say Florida State, Florida, and Miami all have top 10 classes right now.
But yeah, part of that is kind of where those programs have been in the last couple years.
Well, there you go.
I'm not wishing that on you by any means, you know. And the last thing I'll say about this topic, I think I'm not really a fan of the new 12-team playoff, but I think the one silver lining of the 12-team playoff is I think it can bring the fans, the administration off the ledge a little bit, because if Tennessee is just only signing the 9th and 10th and 11th ranked classes in the country, and they're getting the years where they're number 8 and they're number 12, and they actually have a couple playoff appearances to show for it. Maybe you don't even win a playoff game. Maybe you win one playoff game. No national championships, no SEC titles, but you're playing those big games on the big stage. I think that's what college basketball has that college football doesn't have, and that's why you see coaches that stay at places for 10, 20 years, and it's like these coaches that are like institutions, basically, that you just know that he's been there forever. I think you could see more of that in college football, because it feels like in college football, everyone just has a shelf life, because it's like, well, you're not winning a national championship, so we need to get you out of here and find someone who can. So I think just getting to the playoff and being ranked 11th and 10th, I think it's a tangible like accomplishment that can, you know, keep good coaches at good programs for longer.
Stop taking away my peace. I'm peaceful right now, Matt Green. I'm feeling okay. Don't get me all fired about Tennessee recruiting. I'm good. It's everything school HQ. We're fine. I'm not worried. Nico's here.
Shouldn't worry.
Jake Merklinger right behind him. We're fine. Big Ten West. We're not going to spend as much time as we did on the East or the SEC here, because let me just tell you, folks, Big Ten West, not a lot to write home about in the Big Ten West. Matt Green. First question:
bite your tongue, sir.
Who overachieved last year in the Big Ten West?
I think the real question is who did better than 5-4 in the conference. That is the. I think that's our answer here. Almost the entire division went forward.